All right. Welcome, everybody, to the Building a Single Page App with Lightning Components session. Our goal with today's session is to really show you guys how you guys can create single-page apps, which are these engaging applications that they all run on a wizard style of navigation inside a Lightning component. And we're going to show we use parent components, child components, CSS, and Lightning events to accomplish that. So my name is Rodrigo Ribocas. I'm a Senior ISV Technical Evangelist at Salesforce. And before we start, Salesforce is a publicly traded company. We may talk about things on today's session that are not yet available on the platform. So please make all your purchasing decisions based on currently available functionality only. So let's talk about the agenda. So we're going to start off by taking a look at this send offer Lightning component that we created, which is our single-page app Lightning component. We're going to talk about the SPA. So what is an SPA, right? It stands for Single Page Application, like I mentioned. It's an application that runs inside a small container. So it kind of works by itself. So this creates a higher engaging user experience. And then we're going to talk about Lightning-based components, which is something that I'm really passionate about. These are the new building blocks that comes with CSS, JavaScript, everything baked in from Salesforce for you guys to speed up your Lightning components development. So make it faster, use these building blocks. We're going to cover a little bit about that as well. And then we're going to talk about a technique, which sometimes is very handy, which is how to create child Lightning components inside a parent component from the JavaScript code. So how to dynamically create these small child Lightning components from JavaScript code inside a parent. And then, time allowing, we're going to open up for Q&A at the end. So this is our send offer Lightning component. It's part of our recruitment application. So the Salesforce technical evangelist team has created this recruitment application that we share with partners and with customers. So it's on GitHub. We can share how to get it. It has a bunch of Lightning components where we show how to build Lightning components using different techniques. So this recruitment application has the vanilla use case for recruitment. We handle candidates, offers, positions, and so on. And our send offer Lightning component, which is our SPA, it was built with a single purpose, which is when the hiring manager or the recruiter is ready to extend an offer to a candidate. And it has 4 stages. Not sure if you guys could see on that screen, but we have the details. So we have a progress bar. We have the detail stage, the edit stage, the review stage, and the result stage. Before we take a look at this, let's go take a live look at our Lightning component. So here is our candidate record detail page in our demo org. And we created a Lightning action to expose our single-page app Lightning component. So this send offer button here that we click, and we get this modal with our SPA Lightning component inside. So here on this first stage, the hiring manager puts a value for the salary, for example, for the bonus. And then it chooses an offer letter template. This is using Salesforce email templates. And then they click Next. And you see that we get to the edit stage now on our SPA, which brings back the offer letter body based on that email template with the values that the recruiter or the hiring manager provided on that first stage, right? So here, it's a text area field, so the recruiter can make changes to this text. If it looks good, they can click on Next. They get to the review stage, which is a read-only version of the offer letter. And if it looks good, they click on Confirm and Send. And then we make a call to our Salesforce org, and we use Apex to send this offer letter to the candidate by email. So this is basically how it works. I want to share with you guys, back to our deck, the architecture that we used. So here on the bigger square here is our, if you see in blue, the outside, the outermost component, is our parent component called offer letter SPA. It holds the progress bar at the top, as well as the label, send offer. And inside this parent Lightning component, we expose, or we make references to these 4 child Lightning components, so offer details, offer template, offer preview, and offer confirm. And we expose each child inside the parent, one at a time, whenever the user hits those stages in our SPA. So an example would be on our first stage here, you guys may recall, but we expose this offer details child, which is the child component where the user provides the salary, bonus, and the template information. And on the second stage, which we get back that offer letter body, we expose the offer letter template child Lightning component, which is the text area that gets the body back from the server and the user can make changes. So let's go to our code there real quick, because I want to show you how do we do that, right? So we make reference to different child Lightning components, but how do we make only one visible at a time inside our parent? So this is our parent Lightning component, offer letter SPA. And here it's markup, so you see that progress bar that we just showed at the top. So this is using markup that we kind of gather from the Salesforce Lightning Design System website. And here at the bottom, we have 4 different HTML divs. And inside those divs, we have references to those 4 for children. So here's the reference to that first child, offer details, offer template, offer preview, and etc. So how, if you guys may recall, offer details is the first one that we make visible when our parent initiates, right? So how do we make only this one visible at that particular stage? So in order to do that, we handle the Aura system init event, which you guys are probably familiar with, which is the event that gets fired by the Lightning framework whenever our parent first initializes. And whenever that happens, we have a handler doing it, which you guys are probably familiar with as well. And inside that doing it JavaScript handler, we use the following technique to hide the other 3 child components that shouldn't be visible at this particular stage. We instantiate a variable, and then we use component.find to find those 3 HTML divs that contain the child components that shouldn't be visible by their Aura ID. And then we dynamically add a CSS class to make them invisible at this particular stage. So how do we do that? We use a.u2, so the Aura Framework u2 class has this add class method, which holds 2 parameters, right? So toggle text is the HTML component that we want to add the CSS class, and toggle is the CSS class itself that we want to add, the CSS attribute that we want to add to that HTML element. So you guys may wonder, so what does this toggle do, right? So let's take a look real quick. So on our style here, we have the definition of our toggle CSS class, which basically sets the display to none, right? So that's how we make those 3 child components invisible whenever our parent first initializes. Now let's go back to our component, and let's put some values again, because I want to show what we do when we change in our flow. When we click on Next here, this Next button, it lives on the child component level. So this is the representation of the child component that we first see. This Next button, and you see across all the different stages, these Next and Back buttons, they live on the child level. So we needed a way to pass an information from the child component up to the parent component, so the parent can handle the visibility of the different child on the particular different stages in our single page app. So let's see how we do that. So let's go now to offer details.cmp, which is our first child component. And here at the bottom, we have a button, that next button, which calls that handle next JavaScript handler whenever the user clicks on the button. Nothing new there, right? So as I mentioned, we needed a way to pass or to bubble up on information from each child level to the parent component so the parent can play with the visibility. So what did we do? We created a special, not special, but a custom Lightning event of type component to handle this bubbling use case. So each child component has registers for this bubbling event of type C offer SPA notifier event, right? So this is a Lightning event that we created for this communication purpose from child to parent. And let's take a look at that event definition. So here it is. So this is the events markup. The type is component, which again is perfect for this scenario because we need to bubble up information from child to parent level. And then we define one attribute, which is called component action, and the type is string. So back to our child component that is about to fire that event. Let's go back to our button. So whenever the user clicks on next, it calls this handle next click local JavaScript action. So let's go take a look at what that does. So handle next click basically instantiates that component event called bubbling event that we register, that we're going to fire. And then it sets a parameter, that parameter that we just saw on the events definition markup, component action with a specific message. In this case, the message that we're passing from this child to the parent is offer details next, meaning the user is done dealing with this child component. So here's a message that the parent needs to understand to play around with the visibility of the children. And then we fire that bubbling event. So now let's go back to our parent to see how the parent handles this bubbling event. So here it is, the parent's markup. Notice that the parent has an Aura handler to that same bubbling event. And whenever each child in our SPA fires that bubbling event, it's going to execute this handle bubbling local JavaScript action in our controller. So let's take a look at the controller handle bubbling action. Basically, the parent uses JavaScript to instantiate a variable with event.get parameters, meaning we're getting all the parameters from that bubbling event that each child is firing on the different stages. And then we basically take a look at that component action attribute inside our event parameters collection. And we have a JavaScript switch statement that we're going to use for this communication that each child is going to send from child to parent in our SPA. So in our case here, on that first stage, remember that the message was offer details next. So the parent here knows that the user is done with that offer details child components interaction. So we need to hide that first child component interaction now. So we use that same technique of finding the HTML div of the component that needs to be hidden. And then we use a.util add class to add that same toggle CSS class to this child that now needs to be invisible. And now we need to unhide the next one. As you guys may recall, whenever we initialize our parent, we chose to hide all the childs that shouldn't be visible at that particular stage. So we use component of find again to find the child component that needs to be invisible, that needs to be visible now. And now we use a.util.remove class, so not add class. We're going to remove that toggle class that we first added on init when our parent initialized from the child component that now needs to be visible. So that's basically how we use Lightning events and CSS to play around with visibility of children inside a parent Lightning component. Just to highlight that, so here on this diagram, we have, and the blue one is our outermost parent component, and the green one is that first offer details component. And that blue circle is the bubbling event that this offer details child is instantiated and firing with that message inside, offer details next. So this event bubbles up to the parent then handles with that switch statement, and that's how it hides that first child and then hide the next child. And we use the same technique across our entire Lightning single-page app, Lightning component, to control visibility of the children. Now let's go back to our Lightning component, because I really want to show you guys something else. So remember that the user is inputting some values here, right? On each child component in our single-page app. So the salary, the bonus, the template ID. And most likely, all the child components inside our SPA application will need this information at some point for different use cases, right? In our case here, we know that we want to send an offer letter at the end of our wizard flow to the candidate using Apex. So you guys may wonder, are you guys storing this information that the user provides inside each child component back to the Salesforce server? So the answer is no. It doesn't make any sense because it would kill our performance. So we needed a way to persist this information locally, all on the client side, and then make one single call to our Apex, to our Salesforce org at the end of the flow to send that offer letter, right? So how do we do that? Let's go back to our code of that first child, offer details. So notice here that this child registered for an app event of type candidate detail event. So this is another Lightning event. The type of Lightning event is application on this case that we created with this specific purpose that each child needs to aggregate and provide information, pass information to the other child in our flow. So let's take a look at this event, candidate detail event definition. So the type of event is application on this case, which again, we're not dealing with bubble events. We're not trying to pass information from child to parent level, but somehow we need to communicate between the child Lightning components. This type of Lightning events is useful even if the components don't live on the same namespace. So you guys can communicate between Lightning components. So we created a bunch of attributes. So this is our events data structure. So we created fields like, for example, which Lightning component fired it? What was the salary value provided? Where is the bonus value provided? So each child component in our SPA will use this event and will aggregate information with the information that you know so far. So let's go back to the offer details child and see how we do that. So on that same next event, whenever the user clicks on that, we do that bubble event that we already showed, and then we call a helper action at the end. Let me go straight there. And what we do then is we instantiate that application event. So the type now is candidate detail event. And we set the parameters of this event with the information that each child knows at each stage. In this case, we only know, let's see, 7 out of more than 10 attributes that we have defined in our event. And then we fire that application event. So if we go back and click on next, this Lightning component now, which is the second child, receives that information through that Lightning application event, and so on. And that's how we pass information across each child. So to illustrate that, here on the bottom left in yellow, we have the first child Lightning component. It instantiates the Lightning application event with the fields in yellow here, which is the information you know so far. The second child then handles that application event, and it aggregates more information. On this case, it's going to add the offer ID and the offer letter. So using that same Lightning application event, it fires it again, so the next child in the flow can receive that information. And again, this is all done on the client side, so the performance is really good. And notice that we haven't made one single call to the Salesforce org yet. So on the last child's level, it finally receives all the aggregated information that was collected on our SPA application, and then we make one single call to send that offer letter by email to the candidate. And we get back from the org the results of that send. And now let's talk about base components, which is one of my favorite topics. I was waiting for this to be ready, and we're getting to a stage which is really exciting now. So what are base components, right? Lightning-based components are these building blocks with CSS, with JavaScript already hooked up, that you guys can just make references inside your custom Lightning components to create blocks of user interfaces very quickly. They are accessible through code. So think, for example, at an avatar or a checkbox label with SLDS style or a button group. You guys don't need to create them with HTML anymore. Like, this is all. There is a Lightning-based component for all these three and much more. We're going to take a quick peek at the roadmap in a little bit. But this really helps speed up your development. I want to show you guys how to look at which ones are available so you guys can start using it. So to look at which ones are available, I definitely recommend going to the Lightning Components Developers Guide and searching for base components, Okay, you will get to this page working with base Lightning components with a list of all the Lightning-based components that are available for you guys to use on the current release. So here in our example, you're going to take a look at the code real quick, but we use Lightning input in our send offer SPA. So you can click on Lightning input and see its documentation page. So notice that Lightning input, you can play around with this type attribute. You can set up as a checkbox, as a date, and etc. You can also take a look at which base Lightning components are available inside the Aura Docs application in your dev org. So if you go to, if you open up another tab on your dev org and you put Aura Docs pound reference, this Lightning application called Aura Docs will open up with this left pane on the left here. And if you expand components, all the components that are under the Lightning namespace are the Lightning-based components that are available for you guys to use so far. So here's, again, Lightning input. It opens up the documentation page for that, which really helps you adopt these Lightning-based components. Now let's go to back to our code, because I want to show you some examples of base components that we used. So on that first child offer details, you guys may have noticed that this is not a simple button, right? This is a Lightning button. Also, the salary and the bonus fields that we use for the user to provide any salary and bonus information is that Lightning input base component. And if you guys may recall, this is it. So it opens up. It has data validation. You guys can play around with attributes to create data validation. It has CSS, which is looking up not at a static resource for Salesforce Lightning Design System. It's looking at the latest, greatest version of Salesforce Lightning Design system that runs in Salesforce core platform. So this is, again, another great benefit of Lightning-based components. Let's take a quick peek at the base components roadmap. So on summer 17, we're delivering 8 of these small chunks of user interface, of building blocks. So the first one is really interesting. I really recommend checking is force record data. This doesn't render any UI, but this allows Lightning Data Service, which is a browser cache functionality that helps out with performance as well. For winter, we plan to release over 8 Lightning components. So a really interesting one, in my opinion, is Modal. So you guys will be able to open a modal from your custom Lightning components as well. And for spring, we plan to release more than at least those 2, but much more. They haven't been defined yet. But a really interesting one is Lightning List View, meaning that you guys won't need to recreate a list view using HTML like you probably have to do it today, implement filters and etc. This will help you speed up the development of a list view as well. And here is an interesting graph. So our product team really believes that each developer will at least need 86 Lightning-based components to build any kind of user interface with Lightning components. So for winter, which is the Dreamforce release, we plan to reach the number 79. So we plan to reach 79 Lightning-based components available for our developers, which will put us in parity with all the CSS classes that the Salesforce Lightning Design System has examples of how to apply styles to. And for spring, we plan to reach this 86 number, which is our goal. And now let's talk about this technique of dynamically creating Lightning components from JavaScript, right, which I mentioned before. So as a matter of fact, this entire Lightning application, single-page app, the send offer Lightning component, could have been built with this exact technique. Instead of adding the markups of each child inside a parent, we could do it with this technique as well. So basically, there are some particular use cases where if you need more flexibility, reusability, and room for growth from your Lightning components, and if you're using this parent and child architecture, you can use this approach to gain those benefits. So here's an example. If you look there on the right, let's say that we're creating a list view on this case, And our parent component is called list.cmp, which holds just the header and the column headers, the candidate and action. And we need to create, let's suppose that we need to create child Lightning components inside the list, inside that parent, which we would call list_row.cmp, for example. So if we want to gain flexibility, and if we want to set different attributes on those children whenever we're creating them, we can apply this technique whenever we're iterating, for example, on the list of records that comes back from the server. In this example here, we have an if statement checking, is the item supposed to be read-only to the user? If it is, we can, for example, create that list row child component, setting the attribute as read-only. The technique, you see in a little bit the code, but it uses a facet, v.body, that that's how you are able to dynamically create Lightning components inside a parent. And this would, for example, render the list row just with the view option and not with the added option, because this is supposed to be read-only, right? Otherwise, if the user is supposed to have added permissions to that record, we use the same technique, but now we could set an attribute on our child to have the added button available. So you see how flexible you can get with this technique as well. But again, it's not recommended for all types of scenarios, just whenever you need this kind of flexibility. So let's say that your users are defining metadata on a custom metadata type or an S object or a custom setting. So you could use this technique to look at those metadata definitions and build your Lightning components dynamically like this. Let's go to our code, because I want to show you this last step of our SPA, which is the step that we get a confirmation back from the Salesforce org. We show an icon here that indicates success, right? That the offer letter was sent successfully to the candidate by email. But what if there was any error, right, with that Apex trying to send an email to the candidate? We probably don't want to show this icon, right? This happy icon. We want to show something that represents failure, right? So we actually use that technique of dynamically creating child Lightning components inside a parent for this icon. Let me show you guys real quick. So this is our offer confirm child Lightning component. And notice that we add that facet v.body wherever we want to dynamically create that icon on our components markup. And then if we look at the helper class for this child component, we use, in order to create that Lightning component inside that v.body facet, we use a.createComponent. This is a special method from the Aura JavaScript framework that enables us to create components dynamically from JavaScript code. So it has some attributes. So we're creating Lightning icon, which is another Lightning-based component that enables us to create an icon really quickly. And that base component has 3 attributes. So it has the ID, the icon name, which is the CSS class that we want to use to render our icon, and it has the size. But the really important attribute here is icon name, which again is the CSS class that will basically build our icon based on the Salesforce Lightning Design System CSS framework or library. So let's go up a little bit on the code, because that's what I want to show you guys. So after we make that call to our Apex server controller to send the offer letter by email, we get back the results, right? So here on this if statement, we're inspecting the results of that email sent. And if the value is true, we want that icon to show attribute, which is defined here, to be action approval. And if you go to the Lightning Design System website, action approval is the happy icon, right? If not, if there was any problem with us trying to send the offer letter by email to the candidate, we want the CSS class to be action close, which is exactly this red circle indicating failure. So this is what we use. So after a.createComponent, you pass the Lightning component that you want to create dynamically with the attributes, and then you pass a function which inside this if status equals success statement, we basically instantiate the body using component.get vBody. And then we push that new icon that we're creating dynamically to our Lightning Components body facet. And then we use component.set to reset the body of our Lightning component with that updated facet, now including the Lightning icon on this case. OK, so we're going to share this deck after, Trailhead DX with you guys on the website, or I can share on Twitter as well. But here we have some links of the different documentation pages that I showed to you guys, as well as some Trailhead modules regarding Lightning components, how to dynamically add CSS classes, all the components dev guides pages, and also a link to our GitHub code repository where you guys can take a look at the offer letter components markup as well. So let's see how much time we have. I don't think we're over. So if you guys have any questions, let me show you guys. This is my Twitter information, @ROREB. Please send me a tweet. We can communicate through there or to the developer community as well. Yes? Sure. So the question was which Trailhead modules. So it's the Lightning Components basic. There are 2 Trailhead modules for Lightning Components development. So these are the links to both. But the real interesting ones that help build the single-page app are the Lightning Components dev guide resources. So thank you so much, guys.